air is full of pictures. All around us, words and sounds. Invisible music. You can't hear it on your own. You need to be tuned in. Then the images take shape. The static disappears. The invisible is revealed when the signal is received. Our antennas were broken. His powerful voice was silent. His love remained a rumor. Still, it was there, endless but invisible. Until at that moment of belief, the Spirit tuned us in. And suddenly, the truest things exploded into view. Pictures of God's goodness, the music of His grace, received with joy in the highest definition. We gather now to worship the one who sends the signal, and thank Him for the eyes to see the beauty of His love.
Have you ever felt like you're in an episode of The Twilight Zone? Have you ever done that? Have you ever felt like your prayers bounce off the ceiling right back into your lap? Have you ever wondered, Lord, if I just knew what your will is, I would be more than happy to do it. I mean, it's my desire to please you. I just don't know in this situation exactly which way you want me to go. I think sometimes we feel alone. Sometimes we feel isolated from God. Sometimes we wonder, like there's a connection that's been broken. And I want us to talk about that a little bit today. We're in the midst of a series entitled Focus Worship, where we're focusing on, worship. Imagine that. And I've been asking each week, what is your approach to God? That's really the question that we've been starting off with. What is your approach to God? Because how you approach God is going to determine what you get from God. And when it comes to worship, I think sometimes we think that worship begins the moment that we hit the front doors on Sunday morning, but that's not true. One of the things that we talked about is the who of worship, and the who of worship is God, and He's a holy God. He's an amazing God, and because of that, He deserves us to prepare for His presence. And so how do we prepare for worship? Don't tell me, when we get in the car on the way to church on Sunday morning, that's when we prepare, because I know better. I can remember getting into the family vehicle. Sometimes I was driving it, and other times I was younger and I was in the back seat. I can remember my dad saying, the train is leaving the station. Anyone who's not in the car is getting left behind. And I can literally remember running barefoot, carrying my socks and shoes to make it into the family van on Sunday morning. That's not preparation. I mean, there's so much going on with that. So when do we prepare? Do we prepare for entering into the presence of the Holy God? We need to. He's worthy of that. And then the next week we looked not at the who, but the why. Why do we worship? Why do we worship God? Well, because He's the only one worthy of our adoration and praise. He's the only one worthy of our worship because of who He is. And we leaned into the holiness of God a little bit more. We examined His nature, His holy nature. And what an awesome thing His nature is. And then we looked at when the when of worship. When do we worship? Well, we worship all the time. We just worship all the time. It doesn't matter what time it is, we should be worshiping God. And today, we're looking at the where. Where do we worship? And as you know, there are three important things when it comes to real estate, right? What are the top three things? Location, location, and location. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What is the location of worship? And it's kind of similar to the where is kind of similar to the when. When do we worship God? All the time. Where do we worship him? Everywhere. The psalmist put it this way. He said, in Psalm 34, verse 1, he said, I will extol the Lord at all times. His praise will always be on my lips. So if that's true, where do we worship God? Well, if his praise and if we're worshiping him all the time, I guess that means anywhere is the location. Because if we are always worshiping him, even and this is true, if we do it right, if we approach God in the appropriate way, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, even sleep becomes an act of worship. And if that's the case, we can worship God in bed. We can worship God anywhere and everywhere. As a matter of fact, we should, in fact, worship God. Because everywhere we go, this is the answer. Everywhere we go, God is worshiped. If we're worshiping God all the time, then everywhere we are, God is being worshiped. And that's appropriate. As a matter of fact, that's the only thing that truly is appropriate. So this morning, I want to look at a time in the life and ministry of Jesus, and it requires a little setting up, okay? Jesus is taking his 12 disciples on a trip, and there's two ways to go, all right? There's a shortcut that's never taken by Israelites, or they can go the long way around, which is the common path. And the reason is the shortcut is through Samaria, and the Israelites despise the Samaritans, and because of that, the Samaritans despise the Israelites. So Jesus told his disciples, we're going, and they're going, oh, we don't have enough time to make it. And that he goes, oh, yeah, we do. We're taking a shortcut. And they said, where? And he said, through Samaria. And they're going, oh, no, we don't go through Samaria. Well, we're going through Samaria. And as they're going through Samaria, they come to a well, and the disciples, it was that time of day, they were hungry, and Jesus sent them into town for food, and he sat down at the well. And really, this is one of those divine appointment times. Jesus actually went. The whole trip was to make it to this well at this time because there was a special person Jesus wanted to meet. And here she came. There was a Samaritan woman that came out in the heat of the day to get water. Now, that's a clue because that's not how water was gathered, all right? Women went to the well to get water for their families for the day, but they never went during the heat of the day because it's very hot in the Middle East. They would always go in the cool, either in the morning or in the evening, typically in the morning for the day's rations. And she didn't. She came out in the hottest part of the day. Now, why would she do that? Well, because of the second reason. Women tend to travel in packs. And back then, it was for security reasons. Now, guys, we don't know why women travel in packs, or at least go to the restroom at restaurants in packs, right? Have you ever known a woman to say, I need to go to the bathroom and go by herself? Never. And if that happens, call 911. That's my recommendation. Women travel in packs. And so the same was true in the first century. The women, for security reasons, would go together, but also for social reasons. That was a very social time. It's kind of like gathering at the water cooler at work, right? That they would share the town gossip. Now, this woman didn't want to travel with that pack. Why? Because she was the object of the town gossip. She intentionally avoided the other women in the town because she was an outcast. Because of her life. And so instead of coming in the morning when it was cooler and traveling with the other ladies, she came by herself during the heat of the day. And Jesus knew that and was prepared. And when she came, he engaged her in conversation. And she was shocked. She said, why are you talking to me? First of all, you're a man and I'm a woman. And in the Israelite culture, men don't talk to women in a public forum. They just don't do that. So that's odd, all right? And secondly, you're an Israelite, you're a Jew, and I'm a And the reason the Jews didn't talk to the Samaritans and the reason that they avoided Samaria on their trips was because when God gave them the promised land, do you remember that? God told Moses, you can't go into the promised land. Joshua's going to have to lead the people in. But this is the land that I promised to your forefathers, and I'm giving it to you with one catch. I didn't tell the people who are living in the land that I'm giving it to you. So you have to go in and you have to claim the land. And here's the other thing, okay? The people who were living in the land were an evil people. And part of this wasn't just God's gift to the Israelites. Part of this was God's judgment on those people because of some of the evil things that they had done. I mean, really bad stuff. So bad, in fact, that God told the Israelites, when you move into the promised land, you are not to marry outside of Israel. You're not allowed to do that. Jews were only allowed to marry Jews. And the reason is this. It's the same reason that in the New Testament, we're told not to be unequally yoked. And, you know, people are like, well, what does that mean? Well, the scriptures are very clear on it. Being unequally yoked is when a believer marries a non-believer. Because the two most important decisions that you're going to make in your life, first and foremost, is your relationship with God. When you give your life to Jesus, when you surrender completely to Him, one of the things we do is we believe that when you make that decision, you put Christ on through Christian immersion, through water baptism. You know, at that point, you're dying to yourself, you're being buried with Christ in the watery grave, and then you're being raised to live a new life with Jesus. And when I'm talking to people about the symbolism of baptism, one of the things that it symbolizes is kind of like a wedding ceremony. You're saying that I want to forsake all else and attach my life, connect my life to Jesus, just like you do when you marry someone else. And that's a significant thing. It's a public thing. Why do we do that in public? Is it because we want to show or we want to brag? No, we do that in public because it's a public confession. Just like in a marriage ceremony, what makes a marriage ceremony so important is the vows that are exchanged between the man and the woman and the creator of both. And that needs to be done in a public forum so that others can witness it and hold them accountable. That's why we do public wedding ceremonies, not to break Dad's bank. Okay, that's not why we do that. And that's why we do public immersions in water. And the moment we do that, we give our lives to God. And we're saying, I want to live for you and with you. I want to become one flesh with you, just like in a marriage relationship. And the second greatest decision we make is who we choose as a spouse. Because we are becoming one flesh with that person. And if a believer does that with a non-believer, I mean, there's this connection with Jesus, and then this connection with someone who doesn't have that connection with Jesus. And so now there's divided interests, you know. And what Paul says about that is this: how can the light have fellowship with the darkness? How can you merge the most intimate parts of your life and become one flesh with someone who doesn't share the common ground of Jesus if you're a follower of Jesus Christ? That's so important, so very, very important. And so we're told not to be unequally yoked, just like God told the Israelites, don't marry outside of Israel, because if you do, you're inviting a negative influence into your life. Your attention is going to be divided your heart's going to be divided between me and your spouse, and that doesn't work. So don't marry outside. Jews, marry Jews. That was the command at that time. Well, the Samaritans were the offspring of the Jews that didn't marry Jews. They broke that commandment, and they married some of the surrounding people, and the offspring were the Samaritans. And so the Jews despised the Samaritans because they were a constant reminder of Israel's unfaithfulness to the commands of God. And no one likes to be reminded that they failed. And so because of that, instead of being humbled by it, they took it out on the Samaritans. They despised the Samaritans. They wanted nothing to do with them. And the Samaritans responded in kind. So this woman is, first of all, surprised that Jesus is speaking to her because she's a woman and he's a man. But secondly, because he's a Jew and she's a Samaritan. And the Jews considered themselves way above the Samaritans. At least most Jews did at that time. And they began to talk a little bit. And in the course of that conversation, the topic settled on worship. And that's what we're going to focus on this morning. But she was talking about how in her people's belief system, we worship on the mountain, this mountain, and you, the Jews, and your people, you worship in the temple in Jerusalem, and you say that our worship is not worthy. It's less than because it doesn't happen in the temple. Because Judaism was a temple-centric religion. It was all based on the temple. And Jesus responded to her in John 4, verse 21. He said, "Woman," Jesus replied, "believe me, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know, for salvation is from the Jews." Now, there's two parts to this I want to talk about real quickly. Let's talk about the latter part first. Okay, he says, "You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we do know." I mean, that kind of sounds like Jewish or Israeli elitism, doesn't it? It's almost like, once again, you Samaritans are beneath us because you worship what you don't know, but we worship what we do know. But that's not what Jesus is saying here. As a matter of fact, he explains what he's saying. He says, "For salvation is from the Jews." Notice what he didn't say. He didn't say salvation is for the Jews. And that's what most Jewish people believed. We're God's chosen people. The Messiah is coming just for us. To everybody else. Okay? But Jesus isn't saying that. He's saying we worship what we do know. And why? Because for salvation is from the Jews. In other words, the Messiah is going to be Jewish, and Jesus should know above all of the people, being the Messiah and being Jewish. So he's not slamming her. He's just saying that you're right. He's acknowledging, you're right. There are differences in the way your people believe and practice and the way my people believe and practice. But he's saying on the front end of that, but believe me, a time is coming when that's not going to matter. What your people believe isn't going to matter, and what my people believe isn't going to matter, or it will matter, but it won't be the deciding or determining factor. I mean, what you believe is important because what you believe dictates what you do and how you live your life. So belief is very important. But he's saying a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. And the interesting thing about that is, right, he's telling her something that every Jewish person would tell her. You don't worship on the mountain. But he's also saying something that no Jewish person would say, and that is, and you don't worship in Jerusalem in the temple. That would have alienated every Israelite that Jesus knew. They'd say, "What? You can't say that. Our whole religion is based on the temple. Of course, that's the only place to worship." But the point he's making is this: Christianity is less about believing and more about following. Now, notice what I didn't say here. I'm not saying that Jesus said Christianity is not about believing. I didn't say that. I said it's less about believing and more about following. What we believe is important in so much as it influences our actions. But you can believe anything you want to believe. If it never is put into practice, then what difference does it make? In fact, as I mentioned last week, it was the half-brother of Jesus, James, who in his book wrote this. He said, even the demons believe in Jesus, that Jesus is Lord, and shudder. And the implication is, but yet they're going to spend an eternity in hell. You see, it's not about what you believe. It's about what you practice. There's a difference. It's less about believing and what we believe and more about who we're following. And there's only one that we should follow. And Jesus just goes on to describe it this way in the very next part of this passage. He says, "Yet a time is coming and has now come when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the Spirit and in truth." So if you want to be a true worshiper, this kind of settles the whole thing, right? What does it mean to be a true worshiper? Easy. Worship God in the Spirit and worship him in truth. There you go. Have a great week. Well, wait a second. What does that mean? I mean, that sounds good. I see that. But what does it mean to worship God in spirit and in truth? Notice at the end here, he says, God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship him in the Spirit and in truth. 2 parts. They must worship him in the Spirit. Why? Because God is Spirit. That's what it says. So let's break this down. 2 parts. First part is in the Spirit. What does that mean? It means intimacy. It means connecting with God in an intimate way. Let me explain it this way, okay? When God was creating all that is, do you remember? He created it, and he said it is good, and he created it, and he said it is good. And then it came to man, and there was something different about the creation of man because he created man how? In his image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. So we are created in the image of God. What does that mean? Well, like the animals, there are different parts to our nature, okay? And like the animals, we have the flesh or our body, that is the physical part of who we are, of our identity. We are fleshly creatures. And these bodies age and they break down, and eventually they will be no more. It's very temporal. And let me tell you, the older I get, the more temporal I realize my body is, because it takes me longer to get out of bed. I can remember when I used to get injured, my shoulder would be out, and they say, "What happened?" "Oh, I got tackled playing football." You know what happens now? My shoulder's out. "What happened?" "I sneezed last night." Can I tell you, when it takes you longer to stretch and warm up for any athletic activity than it does to actually participate in the athletic event, it's probably time to hang up the cleats or whatever, right? That's what happens. Our bodies are constantly breaking down. And so like the animals, we have a fleshly body. We have a body, all right? And that's part of who we are. And this body has appetites, this body has desires and urges, and sometimes that leads us where we need to go, and sometimes it leads us where we shouldn't. Because this body, this flesh, is broken because we live in a broken world, and we've inherited broken bodies. And sometimes it gets us into trouble. But there's another part of us. We're made in the image of God. And in the image of God, we're spiritual beings. And that separates us from the rest of creation. We're made in the image of God. And what was God, it said? Jesus said, God is Spirit. Therefore, his worshipers must worship him in the Spirit. Why? See, we're able to worship God in the Spirit because there's a spiritual aspect to us. And that spiritual part is eternal. Unlike the body, it's not wearing out, it's not breaking down, it's going to live on forever. Everyone, this is great. Everyone wanted to, there was a big stir many years ago, looking for the fountain of youth. Everyone wants to live forever. Good news. Everyone is going to live forever. Bad news. Where? That's really the question. Oh, we're all going to live forever. It's just that not all of us are going to be living forever in heaven. Some of us are going to be living forever in hell. The good news is we choose which. We choose. And it's not like a multiple choice questionnaire, or it's not based on Bible knowledge. Some of you are going, whew, and others are going, ugh. It's not based on that. It's based on our intimate connection with God. Because what saves us isn't anything that we do, anything that we bring to the table. It's the fact that we're connected to Jesus. Jesus gets us in. All right? And that's what matters. So we're made in the Spirit, and we have this, our spiritual, in our spirit, in that likeness, that image of God, which is eternal. We can commune with God in a way that nothing else in creation can, because we are made in his image. We can commune with him and connect with him in a very intimate way through the Spirit. And then the third part, I mentioned there are 3 parts, is the soul, and that's where the 2 overlap. And the soul is connected to the flesh, but it's also connected to the Spirit, and it's eternal, and it's what makes you uniquely you. It's your personality, it's your memories, it's your experiences. It's all of those things that make you uniquely you. The 3 parts of man. But we can worship God in the Spirit because, like God, we're spiritual. He made us that way in his image. And because of that, we can connect with him in an intimate way like the rest of creation can't, in a way deeper than the rest of creation. Oh, don't get me wrong, all of creation glorifies God. But we can connect with him in a way that the rest of creation cannot, because we are made in his image. We are spiritual beings. And God did that so that our spirit could connect with his Spirit. As a matter of fact, when we give our lives to Jesus, as we talked about earlier, his Spirit actually comes and dwells within us. He takes up residence in us. And he's constantly changing us from the inside out. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. But we have to yield our flesh, which fights against our spirit. That's what Paul talks about in Romans 7. There's this war that's being waged between the members of our body and our spirit. In our spirit, we yearn to please God. But in our flesh, we want what we want, and we want it now. And that's just how it is. So which side wins? Well, the side that we surrender to. Are we surrendering to our flesh, or are we surrendering to our spirit? God calls us to be spiritual people and to connect with him in an intimate way. And since God is spirit, true worshipers, his worshipers, must worship him in the Spirit, or they can't connect in the intimate way that God desires to connect with us. That's why he created us to begin with. You see, God doesn't want anything that we bring to the table. God doesn't, we think worship is about singing. We think worship is about prayer. We think worship is about making sacrifices and doing great things so that God gets the glory. That's not what worship is all about. Worship is about connecting with God in an intimate way. That's what God desires. God didn't create us so that we would build temples and cathedrals or great works or whatever. God created us so that he could connect with us in an intimate way. He loves us. He loves us, and that's the part that I struggle with. That makes no sense to me, why he would love us the way he does. But he does. He does. And he wants to connect with us in an intimate way. And so true worship is connecting with God in an intimate way. That's what it is. So true worshipers worship God in the Spirit. But it also says in truth. What does that mean? Well, it means in practice. You've heard the proofs in the pudding. I mean, it's easy to say things. You know, it's easy to say, yeah, I can do that, or I can do that. Well, yeah, theoretically, I guess you can, but I don't really know that until I see you do it. Until it's put into practice, is it really truth? No, it's just a statement. And anyone can say anything. It's just a bunch of words. It's a bunch of hot air. So what we say is less important than what we do and how we do it. That's what matters. And so what Jesus is saying here is this. He's saying true worshipers are going to connect with God in an intimate way. They're going to worship him in the Spirit. They're going to connect with him. And when you connect with a living, holy, awesome God, guess what? There's evidence. You can't connect with God in an intimate way and not be forever changed. It changes the way you view things. It changes the way you approach things. It changes the way you act with people and interact. And even react. It's fruit. It's fruit. And a life that is intimately connected to Jesus bears fruit. So true worshipers connect with God in an intimate way, and because of that intimate connection, there's fruit. There's evidence in their lives. The way they treat other people, even people that don't believe the way that they believe, i.e. Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the well. The rest of Israel would be up in arms. How dare him be in Samaria? They don't believe the way we believe. Jesus said, you're right, I acknowledge that, but there's a new thing coming. And it's less about what you believe and more about your connection to God through me, he says. It's who you follow. Because you can say whatever you want to say as far as, well, I believe this, I believe that. Well, great. What are you doing? What are you putting into action? How are you changing? And when we worship God, we need to worship him in the Spirit by connecting with him in an intimate way. And when we do that, we can't help but produce fruit. In fact, I've had people talk to me and say, you know what, as Christians, we need to judge others. Specifically, we need to judge other Christians. And that's a slippery slope, okay? If by judge you mean condemn, no. As a matter of fact, we're followers of Jesus, right? Jesus said, I did not come to judge. That is left for my heavenly Father. I did not come to judge. The first time he said, I came to seek and save that which is lost. Now, when he comes the next time, Revelation makes it very clear he's coming in to judge. Oh, he's going to judge, just not yet. And if we're followers of Jesus, that means we can't get ahead of him. It means we need to follow him. And if he said, our leader, it is not for me to judge. Those who do what I say, and even those who do not do what I say, I will not judge. Jesus' words. Then we can't judge them either. We can't condemn them. Who are we to condemn anybody? We're nobody. That's who we are. So we have to be very careful with that. Now, do we judge? We use good judgment. If I'm at the grocery store and I'm buying avocados, mostly for my wife, although she's got me eating them a little bit now, you know, how do I know which ones to pick? Well, I use good judgment. You know, I pick it up and I squeeze it a little and I shake it a little and I sniff it a little, hoping that everyone thinks I know what I'm doing and I don't have an idea. I say a little prayer. I put it in the bag, and when we get home, it's either ripe or not ripe. But you understand what I'm saying, okay? We have to use good judgment. I mean, if we're struggling with a sin, you don't put yourself in the line of fire. You don't go and put yourself where you're going to be tempted. That's bad judgment. Use good judgment. That doesn't mean to judge other people and condemn them. That is not our place. If you want to condemn someone's actions, condemn yourself, your own actions. Look in the mirror. That's where we're supposed to use the good judgment. And we need to make sure that we're doing that. But if we connect with God in an intimate way, it's going to be proven out. It's going to be borne out in the way we live our lives. We're going to live like Jesus. And can I just say the world needs more of that? Basically, what we're talking about is practicing the presence of God. Brother Lawrence was a Parisian monk born in 1605. And to be honest with you, he was the cook at his monastery. And he came up with this concept of practicing the presence of God. And really, this is what it looks like, folks. Practicing the presence of God is just this, acknowledging that he is with you at all times. At all times. And Jesus is right there with you. You practice his presence. He's present. And we know that he's present because in the Great Commission that he gave us, he said, as you go, I want you to do this, this, and this. And by the way, I am with you always, even to the very end of the age. When is Jesus with us? Always. He is always with us. Sometimes we forget that, don't we? Practicing the presence of God is worship. It's acknowledging that God is with me at all times, at all times. And can I tell you, when you do that, it begins to bear fruit. It impacts things. There are probably some movies that you've seen in a theater, or maybe even the privacy of your own home, that if Jesus were sitting in the room with you, you wouldn't have watched. And yet Jesus is sitting in the room with you. Practicing the presence of God impacts the mundane things of life. The morning commute. When someone cuts you off, you tend to respond differently when Jesus is in the vehicle with you. Even driving to work can become an act of worship. Well, bless you. As a matter of fact, I'm going to say a prayer for you because obviously you've got some issues in your life right now and you need prayer. Don't close your eyes. Don't bow your head if you're driving. Just pray for that person. Practicing the presence of God impacts the way we respond to a post on social media. Because Jesus is right there as we type that response. That is true worship. Because when you connect with God in an intimate way, it bears fruit. It impacts every aspect of who you are. And that doesn't mean you're not going to make mistakes. You are. You are. That's one of the reasons why Jesus is with us. Everywhere you go, Jesus goes with you. So where are you willing to go with God? Because wherever you go, you're taking him with you. Don't take him places he doesn't want to go. But by all means, take him places he needs to be. Look at the culture around us. It is a mess. And the answer, the solution, isn't a political one. It's not an economical one. It's not even a system of beliefs or thinking the right way. The solution is more of Jesus. That's what the world needs. That's what we need. Where are you willing to go with God? Are you willing to go out into the community and let your light shine? Because there's nothing more worshipful than sharing Jesus with others. And I'm not saying knocking on doors and saying, do you know Jesus? I mean sharing Jesus in the way that you're living your life. And let me tell you something. If you're connecting with God in an intimate way, people will take notice. They can't help but. Because there's evidence, there's fruit. And it's different. It is so different. Where are you willing to go with God? Where will you take Jesus? This community needs him. What we do in this building is important. What we do on this property is important. And what we do together is important. But what we do outside of this place, what we do in this community bears eternal fruit. Someone introduced you to Jesus. Who are you introducing to Jesus? Because there's nothing more worshipful than that. Nothing more worshipful than that. And so in a moment, as we enter into a time of adoration and praise to God, I'm going to ask you just to yield your heart to him. As we worship this morning, it's not just in word and deed. It's not just in song and scripture, but it's in the Spirit and in truth. Truth evidenced by fruit, undeniable truth. And there's nothing more fitting for this time For as we enter into the presence of a holy God, we should adore him. Will you join me in standing as we do that right now?
Sing these words with me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Holy, holy is he. Sing a new song to him who sits on heaven's mercy seat. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all creation I sing praise to the King of Kings. You are my everything, and I will adore you. Clothed in rainbows of living color, flashes of lightning, rolls of thunder. Blessing and honor, strength and glory and power be to you, the only wise King. Yeah. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was and is to come. With all
just always seems so busy. Of course, I feel like every season seems to get busier and busier, right? And I feel like I can't get ahead sometimes. God doesn't want us to be burdened with those things. And if you need prayer, know that you can come to us. We'll pray with you after service. And if you've made a decision today to change your life and give it to Him, come forward, let us know. We want to celebrate that with you and walk beside you. We have an amazing God, don't we? Let's give Him our hearts. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true. Sing that again. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true, 'cause I am found, I am yours, I am loved, I'm made pure, I have life, I can breathe, I am healed, I am free. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Here's my heart, Lord. Speak what is true, 'cause I am found, I am yours, I am loved, I'm made pure, I have life, I can Speak what is true. You may be seated.
As we enter into a time of communion, we leave a time where we just offered our hearts to God. And that is truly what he desires. And we might wonder, why would we offer our hearts to God? All we have to do is look at the cross. Just take a moment and look at the cross. We offer him all because he has already given his all. There's nothing we can give him that's worthy of the sacrifice that he made for us. So as we offer our hearts this morning, we connect with God in an intimate way. And as the psalmist in Psalm 26:2 said, "Test me, Lord, and try me. Examine my heart and my mind. For I have always been mindful of your unfailing love and have lived in reliance on your faithfulness. Test us, Lord. Try us. Examine our hearts in this moment. And Lord, if there's anything that separates us from you, any boundary, any obstacle, break it down, Lord. Eliminate it from our lives. Father, we desire to be wholly yours." Over the next few moments, I'm going to ask you, as you examine your hearts, to partake of the emblems that God has given us of the bread and of the cup, his body and his blood. So take a few moments and examine your heart, commune and connect with him in an intimate way. And when you're ready, partake of these emblems.
We get to find a peace through knowing that he's done everything, that he's already done it all, that sacrifice was made, and so that we get to just live freely, just knowing that peace and just trusting in that peace of what's going to happen in our lives and what's going on, what has happened, what will happen. We just know that it's in his hands. So would you please stand and worship with us for this next song?
Sound of his voice. Seas that are shaken and stirred can be calmed and broken from my regard. Through it all, my eyes are on you. Through it all, it is well. And through it all, dwell with me.
So the next time you find yourself in an episode of the Twilight Zone, it can be well with your soul. If you're practicing his presence, if you're acknowledging that he's there with you, if you're looking to him, we have the peace that passes understanding at our disposal. So this morning, as you leave this place, go with God and take Jesus where he needs to be.